Another week in the Ontario Hockey League, which means another week to share with you all of the information from the best development league in the world. And you have found the premier place for that information. So while you're here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. There you go. Welcome to our OHL podcast community. My name is Mike Farwell, on X at Farwell_OHL. My partner in podcasting, Dan Mahar, he's on X at his name, Dan Mahar. Give us a like, tell a friend, send an email anytime, ohlpodcast@rogers.com. We love to interact with this OHL podcast community. And you know, Dan, it was just a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the level of legacy for the Kitchener Rangers, the inaugural inductee, Pete DeBoer. And since that induction to the level of legacy with the team he was once the head coach and general manager of, Pete DeBoer's name has been linked to Edmonton, Nashville, and Toronto. It's good to be an out-of-work NHL coach, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's only a matter of time when you look at the number of options available to these teams. And this is the time of year, isn't it, when there's always 3 to 5 teams where the rumblings are starting. And I know a number of Leaf fans in this area were hitting me up. Why don't we get DeBoer? Get DeBoer in there. Well, I'm not sure Berube's quite on his last rope yet. But Nashville, as much as I love Bruno there, Andrew Burnett, something's going to change there soon, I think. And DeBoer's got to be top of the list for most of these teams.
I bring that up, of course, because in the league that we cover, the first coaching vacancy has just been made available. That is in Sarnia, where Al Letang was let go this past weekend, Dan. And interestingly enough, just last week on this podcast, we had a free agent coach out of the queue, Matthew Turcotte, on talking about coaching and dealing with the modern day athlete, etc. Also, some success with Hockey Canada at the U17s and U18s for Matthew Turcotte. But to the matter at hand, during a road trip through the East, Peterborough, then Ottawa, and finishing up in Kingston on the weekend without Al Letang, who was dismissed mid-road trip.
Yeah, and I'll be blunt and I'll be honest. I'm actually surprised it took this long. And you know, I'm right up front about saying love Alan Letang is a terrific guy, was a terrific player, and I don't like to see anyone lose their job. But you know the business. Coaches are basically hired to be fired for the most part. You get a few exceptions, but tenures are not that long anymore. And often the rope gets short when teams are not succeeding year over year in junior hockey because it's supposed to be cyclical. So, you know, you have your year or two of down times, then you're supposed to have your year or two of up times. And if you're not realizing those, well, then it starts to weigh on the franchise. And the Sarnia Sting have had lots of talent in and out, just have not really gotten over that hump. And in a year this year where it looked like they had a lot of young talent, still not making that ascension through the standings, right? You didn't need to win the West this year, but you know, so show some progress, move up, maybe flirt with home ice in the playoffs. But it was going the other way. And frankly, there were some embarrassing outings as well. There was some lack of discipline. You could just see the writing all over the wall for a while now, actually dating well back into last year. So I'm a little surprised it took this long, but yeah, something has to give when things are going that way.
It's, of course, far worse on home ice, but anytime you see a 9 put up against your team, which is what happened in Ottawa before Letang's dismissal, you know that things are bad, and that's when moves like this tend to happen. I suspect that's why it happened mid-road trip. Don't even let them finish it off. Maybe stick around Ottawa. It's a nice city to visit. But after that 9-3 loss, that was the end for Alan Letang.
Yeah, it's kind of, I thought about that, right? That's... Could it have happened before that game? Was that I guess that was the final straw, but it's awkward having that happen while on a road trip. Makes for a weird departure, I guess. But yeah, I think this probably in most people's minds should have or could have happened in the off season, or certainly a little bit before now. But it's still early enough to salvage that season. It's a must-make playoffs this year for the Sarnia Sting, so you can't let it go any longer.
Anyone who watches us on our YouTube channel, the OHL podcast, can see from my background that I'm a huge Cornwall Royals guy. I talk all the time about bringing back the Royals. Alan Letang, a former Cornwall Royal, and one of only 2 former Sting players to also become the Sting head coach, Trevor Letowski, the other one. Here's the thing when it comes to Alan Letang, and you touch on it, Dan, with the sort of what have you done for me lately approach to dealing with coaches in this league and others, of course, but he is, Alan Letang, the only coach to ever get the Sarnia Sting to a Western Conference final. And they did that in 2023. Then back-to-back years without a playoff appearance when they're supposed to be coming back up now through that cycle. And you've got players like Beckham Edwards and Alessandro Diorio that you're expecting to build around. And obviously, you're expecting more out of. Doesn't help that Diorio hasn't been in the lineup all season for the Sarnia Sting. So that certainly isn't the coach's fault necessarily, but you look at some of the other younger talented players. I'm thinking of a guy like Houston Hurt that probably hasn't developed or had the kind of season so far that was expected of him. So it's the age-old story that you can't fire 20 players, so you just take the head man out, cut off the head of the snake, so to speak, and out goes Alan Letang here. I'm with you, though, on every dealing I've had with this guy over the years, and this goes back to his time in Owen Sound. Just great to deal with, good guy, and he's in a rotten profession, and I can relate to that. I had an old broadcasting professor say to me 30 plus years ago, "You're not a success in this business until you've been divorced and fired." Well, check and check. And I'm not saying I'm a success, but boy, oh boy, those are the sorts of things that happen in the industry that I try to make a living in, and obviously it's the same for coaches.
It is. And, people that have never done it in the coaching business don't understand all of the nuances to it. It's not just understanding the game. It's understanding the teenage brain. It's not just understanding the teenage brain. It's understanding their representation, their families. It's understanding how the psychology changes over time. It's understanding social media and everything that there's just 101 different aspects that go into it. And that's why, I have all the appreciation in the world for these coaches that have been doing it for 30 or 40 years and still doing it well, because they've had to change with the times so many times. And, I'm not trying to make excuses for coaches or people that underperform or things don't go well, but it's not an easy gig. And you're never going to have smooth sailing throughout the entire season, no matter what talent you have in your roster. And I think that's kind of what hurt Alan Letang, is you referenced 2023. That Sarnia Sting team had as much talent on as anyone in the league, potentially anyone in the CHL. And so going out in the third round for a lot of teams is a good thing, but going out in the third round when you have that much talent is kind of a disappointment, right? So you look at all of these things that went into his tenure there, and I agree with you. He's just a terrific guy. He'll land on his feet. You referenced Trevor Letowski, didn't always have the best time coaching the OHL, and now he's got an assistant coach job in the NHL and doing just fine. These guys will land on their feet, but it's a hard gig. I'll put it that way. It's a hard gig.
Alan Letang's got that experience with Hockey Canada as well, the World Juniors, etc. And just to go back to the Pete DeBoer point, famously, just most recently fired from the Dallas Stars, not the first team that he's been dismissed from. And all of those rumors around which team DeBoer might go to next in the pros, he was asked when he was back in Kitchener if he'd ever consider returning to this league and this level of hockey. "I'm too old to chase around teenagers," said Pete DeBoer. So to your point about how difficult it is, and perhaps even more difficult or uniquely difficult at the junior level as well.
Yeah, and just on that point, without telling any tales out of school, but it was a different era when Peter DeBoer had so much success in the OHL. Even though it doesn't seem that long ago to you and I, the tactics that were employed by coaches at the time are no longer okay, which is partly what I'm talking about adapting. And I'm not saying Peter DeBoer couldn't do it or some of these coaches couldn't do it, but you have to be able to do it and change with the times. And that's probably why he snickered at that question. It's a different animal right now, and going back and trying to figure it all out again probably doesn't appeal to a 57-year-old in his shoes.
Other news and notes around the Ontario Hockey League this past week. I'm going to lump them all into one category here, Dan, as kind of a you heard it here first sort of thing. And we'll start with the live draft in Kingston. It will happen next summer. You and I were talking about this about a month ago now. Love the idea all around. And now the league just confirms what we first told you about a month ago.
Yeah, it's nice to have official confirmation, even though it was pretty much leaking that it was going to happen. And like we talked about before, I think it's a great move for a lot of reasons. There's pros and cons to both formats, but I think everyone tends to agree that in-person's the best. It's an event. It's a time in the lives of these kids, right? And I know it's not going to go perfectly well for every kid that hopes to get drafted or hopes to get drafted in a certain round, but it's still a massive event for these kids. It's a massive event for the league and profile for junior hockey. And like we said, I think Kingston is just a terrific spot to hold it. Fairly central, beautiful city. Hopefully, we'll drum up some interest in that area too. So I'm all for it.
I love the word you just used there 3 times, event, because think of the new, we can still call him that, right? Into his second year, commissioner of the Ontario Hockey League, Brian Crawford. He'll be the first to tell you he's not a hockey guy per se. He comes from an athletic background as a CFL football player. He was with Guelph and putting together, organizing high level professional golf events before coming over to the Ontario Hockey League as commissioner. He's an event guy first and foremost, and you know that that is the lens through which he's viewing the return to this live draft. And you nailed it. This is going to be an event, and hard to think of a better city to host it in as you bring it back to a live event than Kingston, especially in the summertime, on the water, great downtown scene, et cetera, et cetera. The hard part for that live draft is going to be getting all of the media there with their eyes open for day 2. Because I'm telling you, we're going to have to take this podcast on the road, Dan, for the draft. And then we'll see how we feel on day 2. Day 2. I've covered a Memorial Cup or 2. I know what it's like after the games finish on any given night.
I'm all for it. I think it's terrific and it'll be an exciting event. But you're right. There's enough distractions and other things to see and do in Kingston in the summer that, round 7 might be a tough one to be alert for. But for the kids, it means a lot. So.
Something else that you heard here first, and Dan just mentioned it in our wraparound last week, that was the Caden Taylor situation, if you will, in Peterborough. Taylor, one of those first-round picks from the Ontario Hockey League, from Sudbury initially, that Peterborough went out and acquired as they began their rebuild, but for whatever reason, things just weren't working out. He was away from the team on a personal leave, and you said last week, Dan, let's hope to see that situation get sorted sooner rather than later. Sooner it was, and Caden Taylor is now a member of the Owen Sound Attack. In exchange, the former first-rounder goes for a 3rd and a 5th back to Peterborough.
Yeah, Mike, I think 2 interesting things about this deal jump out at me. First, that there was a condition on the deal where if he scores 20 or more goals, the 5th-round pick improves to a 3rd, which is very interesting. I'm surprised these conditions haven't shown up in trades more often across hockey leagues where they're performance-related conditions. So it takes a lot of the risk out of it. It still doesn't increase the trade value to what his former first-round status was, but it gives some protection to Peter. This guy goes and blossoms there. We're getting a little more for him. And the second interesting thing about this trade was, I don't know if you caught Rob Wilson's comments, Mike, in the media after the trade, but he made a comment about how Caden Taylor and his representation may not have felt that the style was a fit in Peterborough. And I thought that was interesting because it references representation, so obviously the agent and family were involved as well. But secondly, it goes to show how sometimes the fit just isn't there based on the style of teams trying to play. And we know Rob Wilson's teams are defensively sound. They grind it out. They're gritty. They keep it low scoring. And Caden Taylor's an offensive guy. He likes to put points on the board, likes to maybe cheat a little times at offense and not necessarily commit fully on the back end of the game. But that's his game, and that's not really Peterborough and Rob Wilson's game. So maybe it just was a square peg in a round hole, and goes to a spot where it'll work for him. And I see those types of potential deals around the league, and I'm surprised they don't happen more often. Where it's like, this player is a good player, he's just not a fit here. So anyway, those were the 2 things that caught my eye about this trade, and we'll see how it develops with his play in Owen Sound.
I noticed those same comments from Rob Wilson in media in Peterborough, and don't ever forget, and this just reminds us that there is representation, or there are people around these players. Most notably, it's family, but there are also agents involved. So absolutely did take note of that. A change of scenery can always be a good thing, obviously. One of the other things I took away from this, to go to your point, Dan, about Caden Taylor being an offensive spark plug, maybe cheats on occasion defensively, I think Scott Ray will demand that there is less or no cheating defensively. But I found it really interesting what Dale DeGray, the general manager in Owen Sound, had to say about Taylor's arrival at the Bayshore, and that is there is an opportunity for Caden Taylor to put his offensive skills to work here, because the defensive philosophy, according to Dale DeGray, the general manager in Owen Sound, is when you're in the defensive zone, the idea is just to get the puck back so you can go on offense. And wherever it is, you get that puck back in the defensive zone, even if it's on your own goal line, all of a sudden you're back on offense. So an interesting perspective from the GM in Owen Sound about what's going to be expected of Caden Taylor. But bottom line is, if you can get the puck back and have possession for your team at any time, it's automatically time to start thinking offense. And that might be the fit that the Owen Sound Attack are looking for, especially after dealing away a guy like Michael Deck in exchange for Wesley Royston a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it all makes sense to me. And you know that despite everything you just said, which is all true about the Owen Sound Attack, they also demand a defensively responsible game too. So it's not like they're just taking the reins off all their players and saying, yeah, go score. But it will be that counter-attack, counter-punching ability that Caden Taylor can bring. And I think the shrewdest GMs in the league identify those opportunities, right? Kid's not really blossoming in this system, in this under this coach, or for whatever reason. And it's classic buy low candidate, right? Jump on there. You get a big kid who is a first-round talent, and I mean, it's a low-risk proposition for Owen Sound, so I expect it'll work out for both teams.
And I don't know about you, Dan, but I found myself surprised a few weeks ago when I just happened to notice the number of goals for that the Owen Sound Attack had to the record. In my mind, and maybe it's just because of the confines of the Harry Lumley Bayshore Community Center where the Owen Sound Attack play, but I've always felt as though they're that bang and crash, grind you down, defensive-minded team, but they're 90-plus goals for, leading the Western Conference behind only the Brantford Bulldogs overall. So I guess what Dale DeGray is saying, where it's almost like an offense-first philosophy there, bears itself out, at least if you're using the goals scored as a measuring stick, which why wouldn't you? The Owen Sound Attack are filling the net so far this season.
Yeah, and you probably remember this discourse too, Mike, because it's funny. I know when they did some modifications at the arena this year, the local folks were worried, well, is the Bayshore bounce going to be gone now? Are we going to lose that advantage? But I think it's just a philosophy play in that rink, whether you're getting that quirky bounce off the boards or not. They know how to be on top of the net. And you've seen it as many times as I have in that rink, Mike, where you think you're in okay shape and suddenly bing bang, it's right in your slot and they're on top of you. So things can change in a heartbeat there, and that team gets calibrated to look for those opportunities and look for those bounces, and they can turn something into nothing in a hurry. And I think every team can relate. You think you're okay and suddenly it's in the back of your net, and the Attack know how to take advantage of that, and that's why their goal for totals look like they do.
One more thing for us to touch on that's kind of old ground, but a story that is continuing. And that is the Oscar Hemming story with the Kitchener Rangers, or what sounds like now might never be the Kitchener Rangers, because this saga just continues to drag out and add new and interesting chapters, probably frustrating chapters if you're a Kitchener Rangers fan. But I just want to go back to a couple of weeks ago when we talked about the Oscar Hemming situation on this podcast. I had just spoken to Rangers general manager Mike McKenzie. Again, this is 2 weeks ago now, little more than. And he said in that interview, direct quote, he expected this story to come to its conclusion one way or the other within a day or two. That was more than 2 weeks ago. This story, Dan, is still not at its conclusion. But I can tell you from that conversation with Rangers general manager Mike McKenzie all that time ago, I thought we'd see Oscar Hemming, playing already with the Kitchener Rangers.
So yeah, Mike, I see a lot of commentary about this in general on social media and in the media, from fans, from social media accounts, etc. And I'm not sure everyone's quite getting it right, because no one knows exactly what's going on, and people seem to be taking it black and white, one side or the other. Well, yeah, absolutely, he broke his contract. Why would he sign, or he be allowed to be released? And the other side saying, oh, just let him play. He's a kid. They're holding him back. We know it's more nuanced than that. And if you saw the most recent comments from Mike McKenzie, like you said, 2 weeks after he thought he had a deal, the frustration was palpable, and he said more by what he didn't say, but he suggested that the Finnish team in Espoo was playing some games, my words, not his, but essentially that it hadn't been the most ethical negotiation back and forth. And the inference was that, the discussion had gone one way one day, and then just nothing for days, then a totally different path later. So I think that's where I'm starting to have trouble is I'm not sure everyone in this is being straight up. And I think what we saw was Oscar Hemming had leveraged the BCHL as an option. Well, if you're not going to transfer me, I'm not coming back, so I'll just go there, and you won't get the development fees. Well, it sounded like all along while they were having these discussions with Kitchen Rangers and Mike McKenzie, at the same time in a back room they were talking to the IHF and talking to them about what leverage they had, and the IHF came in and threatened to ban Oscar Hemming from being able to play there for 3 years, which was really pulling his BCHL leverage. If you sign there, buddy, you're not going to be able to play for the World Juniors or the under 18s or any of this stuff. So that actually pulled that BCHL leverage from Oscar Hemming, and now he's caught again. Well, I can't go to the BCHL, I'm stuck here. So it feels like they're playing a few different angles. There's a lot, I'll say shady, my word again, but there's a lot of things going on here that aren't your standard, straightforward, honest negotiation. And unfortunately, the kid is the one who's losing.
And now the kid is apparently looking at NCAA options. I don't know how that washes with Espoo back in Finland or the IIHF, because the IIHF is threatening these 3 years of banning from international play for Oscar Hemming if he plays in the BCHL or if he plays in the OHL. I can't figure any of that out, how that would then exclude somehow the NCAA, unless they look at it for the scholastic side of things. But nonetheless, messy's a good word for it. 2 words directly that came from Rangers GM Mike McKenzie in this were unethical and corrupt at different times in different interviews. Unethical was a word that I heard when I talked to him. Corrupt is a word that appeared in a newspaper report this past week. And I think Mike McKenzie's done talking about it because this situation has been so frustrating for him. I wonder if there's anything behind that language that has made things worse for Mike McKenzie. I don't know. But the bottom line in all of this is I cannot believe an ice hockey federation like the IIHF would threaten a 17-year-old kid like this. Nobody, it seems, is taking into account the interests of a 17-year-old player. I get it. It's like the girl you liked in high school, or maybe you dated for a minute and she decided she liked somebody else better. Like it hurts, but you move on. And sometimes teenagers do things that don't make a lot of sense to you or that frustrate you. And I know the family's involved in this too. I get all of it, but this is just ugly all around because a 17-year-old kid is having his own future development stunted by not being able to play. And these higher level organizations with the power wielding it in this way is just so far offside from where I'm sitting. I don't know what else to tell you. The last thing I will say on it is, because the Kitchener Rangers have made it clear, and we all know if a player gets drafted out of your organization, there is money that comes to that organization from the National Hockey League. And the Rangers have said to the Finnish team, look, you can have that money. We will forfeit it. So if it's the money you're worried about, don't worry about that anymore. Well, those numbers are $20,000 to $30,000. I have heard much, and I mean significantly higher numbers than that, being bandied about in this whole quote unquote negotiation. But the kid loses in all of this, and I think that sucks.
Very well said. There's not much I can add to that other than to say you're absolutely right. I mean, if you add up all the weight of evidence here, this is nothing more than an extortion. That's basically what it looks like. And I hear the people saying, well, then he shouldn't have broke his contract. He shouldn't have signed. He should have had an out clause. Yeah, fair enough. He should have done things the right way. But this isn't a kid agreeing to a contract with the Kitchener Rangers then deciding he wants to play with the London Knights. These are 2 unrelated, very different leagues. Kid has clearly outgrown that league. You've punished him enough. A kid who is a first-round potential draft pick in the NHL this year has now missed over 2 months of hockey. Enough. Okay, you've made your point. Yes, he maybe should have done it this way, but at some point the bottom line becomes, let's allow the 17-year-old to do what's best for him and his family. And, it's not going to be for your team. Just accept it. And at very least, negotiate in good faith. Say that, you know what, we'll do it for this price, or be open and upfront about it. Because if you don't, if you lead us to believe this isn't about the money, then you're just being absolutely petty and you're holding back a kid. That's it.
If I didn't know any better, Dan, I would have sworn the CHL did this on purpose. And this is on the week during which the Kitchener Rangers and Guelph Storm play a home and home against one another. The CHL says it will let us know before this week is done which one of those two teams will host the 2027 Memorial Cup. But here we are. The site visits to both cities have been done, and we will know by the end of this week, straight from the CHL, that the decision will be announced, and we'll know, is it Guelph or is it Kitchener, where we will all be attending for the Memorial Cup in 2027.
Yeah, and it's anyone's guess at this point. I think the favorite is clearly Kitchener. A lot of people are assuming that it'll be Kitchener for a host of reasons, pun intended. But I think one thing I'm starting to hear leak out is I heard through the grapevine, I wasn't there, but I heard the grapevine that the Guelph presentation was excellent, that the committee was really impressed by it, and that they have a lot going for them. So I see it as maybe a bit more of a coin toss than others do, Mike, but it's two very close, distinct rivals who, like you said, play twice in the week leading up to this decision. So it's just adding to the intrigue, is it not?
I don't know really how you would choose Guelph based on arena and that in and of itself, simply because you've got about 3,000 almost more seats to offer in Kitchener than you do in Guelph. And obviously, the more bums in seats, the more eyes on your game, and the more revenue that is generated through the tournament. So that in and of itself, I would think, makes Kitchener a slam dunk, not to mention the arena itself, the Memorial Auditorium, is the class of the Ontario Hockey League as far as I'm concerned. And I say that in the sense, of course, that it is described by many as more cathedral than arena, and acknowledging it was built in 1951. So I'll reference again our buddy Joe from Long Island, who was in Kitchener a week or so ago, got to say hi, posted a picture. He posted online following his trip through the OHL and raved about the Memorial Auditorium as being the best arena he's ever visited. So don't take it from me. Having said that, I get a pretty interesting view of it all in terms of the spaces that I work in. So I'm not sitting in the stands. And I will admit, having attended an event at the Memorial Auditorium a couple of years back and being in the stands for the first time, I realized, boy, oh boy, they didn't build these things with a whole lot of space back in 1951, did they? So Guelph certainly would have that advantage when it comes to the modern amenities, the wider concourses, etc. But again, we're talking a difference of almost 3,000 more seats that you're offering at the Kitchener Memorial Auditorium versus the Sleeman Center in Guelph. So creature comforts be damned. I think you'd want to go where you can get even more bums in seats. The other thing is kind of behind the scenes. Guelph would have some work to do, but it was interesting having just paid my first visit to the Sleeman Center. In their press box, it's really cramped for the broadcasters, at least the radio broadcasters. It's a pretty tight space, but the press box has all this space kind of in behind. It's like a big open area. And I've always thought this is kind of like wasted space here. And wouldn't you know, I walk into it this past weekend and they've put that space to use. They've got some high top desks there now that you could sit at, get some work done. They've got some really nicely Guelph Storm emblazoned logo chairs in there. I'm like, oh, okay, you're starting to think of a better use of this space. And that's just one of the aspects of it. But if you're going to fit all of the media, because this is a national tournament then in Guelph, you're going to have to figure out some things, including where the media gathers to get coffee, make notes, etc. Because the media room as it stands in Guelph right now is frankly too small for a Tuesday night game in the regular season of the OHL. You'd have to improve a lot of those behind the scenes things, but those can be relatively easy fixes. You can curtain off an area of the arena. You can find a brand new room. I don't know what they would do. I think the Rangers still have it over Guelph in that regard as well. But the real wild card in all of this is something that I think Guelph offers that nobody else has before or can again, and that is the fact that 2027 is the bicentennial, the 200th anniversary of the city of Guelph. If you want to tie in to give a once in a lifetime, if you will, junior hockey experience, ain't nobody can touch that. And maybe that in and of itself is enough to sway the host committee. I don't know, but to me, that's the biggest wild card that Guelph has going in its favor.
And I've heard that same opinion as well, and I don't disagree. It is a nice hook. It's a nice reason for the city to invest as well. And so you have those factors going for you. And I think you touched really well on a lot of the building amenities. And, I had someone in the Guelph area tell me that, having attended games in both arenas a lot recently, that seat width thing is a factor, that the seats are more comfortable in Guelph than they are in Kitchener, being an older building. And fair enough. So but the 3,000 seat thing is huge, right? Revenue potential is massive to the CHL. And you look at all kinds of other little quirks and amenities, right? Like the twin pads attached to the rink in Kitchener, great practice ice right there with extra room availability for teams to store their equipment and everything they're bringing with them. You've got the teaching rooms, you've got the lounges. They're rushing to build a restaurant there. The area in Kitchener just breathes more. There's more parking. There's more space to accommodate all the things that come with a Memorial Cup. Guelph always feels tight to me, and then of course the highway access as well. You have a very convenient linkage to the highway into the 401 right from beside the rink in Kitchener. Guelph, you kind of got to weave your way downtown through some crowded streets with questionable parking. So these are all things that weigh in, because when you hear from the NHL community and the scouting community, those are things that will factor in. They'll say, well, where would you guys like it? And then we say, well, we'd rather it here. But I think at the end of the day, Mike, it comes down to what you mentioned with 3,000 seats, is the revenue potential in Kitchener is that much higher. And really that's an outsized criteria. And I think that will be weighed heavily into the decision. So I know I'm biased. I'm not knocking Guelph. I'd be just as happy to see them awarded and have it. But I think all things being equal, that's why Kitchener's currently the favorite, I would think.
And I think you hit on another really important aspect of this, Dan, when you talk about those two other ice surfaces that are part of the Kitchener Memorial Auditorium complex. So while you've got the games happening on the main ice, you've got two other rinks that are there for teams to practice on. In Guelph, you've got the Sleeman Center. And so those three other teams that are involved, or the other two teams, while two teams are playing, are going to be practicing where and how do they get there, and what's the proximity to a hotel, and those streets around the Sleeman Center are supposed to be under construction. I think the city could probably, modify its construction schedule so it's not too much of an impact, but I think those two rinks that the Kitchener site offers are huge. And just to your acquaintance that was talking about the creature comforts and the amenities, just go back and ask him what he thinks of that video board at the Sleeman Center. Because I'm sorry, that if they're not going to upgrade that before the Memorial Cup gets there, because that is very dated compared to the beautiful screens they have in the Memorial Auditorium. So there's that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you raised that, because I did hear Ranger CEO Joe Birch being interviewed on your broadcast the other night, and he talked about the investments the city of Kitchener has made and the Rangers have made over several years. It's been a long-term capital plan to upgrade the video board, to upgrade the rooms. So there's this constant investment in the team, which to me just says professionalism, right? It says that we're eager to be a leading-edge franchise. So when these opportunities come up, we're in the front of the line. So I think those things matter. And, it's not just popping up and deciding we're going to bid and haven't really done anything to be ready for it, I guess. And the Kitchener Rangers clearly do. So that has to put them in good stead for these types of competitions.
Big news coming from the CHL this week. Sounds like Dan and I are in agreement. Our money's on Kitchener, but it's going to be an interesting choice made by the CHL as to who will host the 2027 Memorial Cup. Still big news on this week's episode of the OHL podcast, including news on every single team in the league with the wraparound coming up. And are we about to get our longest suspension of the season in the OHL? Maybe our longest suspension in years. The answer is likely yes. We'll get to that as we continue this week on the OHL podcast. Hockey is back, and this season, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, brings you all the speed, skill, and non-stop action you love. DraftKings Sportsbook delivers the unmatched intensity of the NHL right to your fingertips. From player props to the thrill of live in-game betting, every drop of the puck is your shot to win big. New customers, this one is for you. Bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get paid out $300 in bonus bets instantly. Look, if you need a sports betting product, this is the sports betting product you need. Light the lamp all season long with DraftKings. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. It is time for our weekly skate around the entire Ontario Hockey League. We want to make sure you have information on all 20 teams in the league, a little something we call the Wraparound, and Dan is on Western Conference duty this week, so he's going to get us started in Erie.
Yeah, and in Erie, just a couple of minor notes of interest. So the Erie Otters have changed their Junior B affiliate from Port Colborne to Fort Erie. Interesting move. The Fort Erie Meteor has been a good franchise the last couple of years, so maybe save 20 minutes on cab fare when you have players go back and forth. So a little more convenient for them. And I just want to point out, we talked about Michael Deck, the acquisition earlier. It looks like it's a trade that's working definitely for the Erie Otters so far. They wanted an infusion of skill and offense in a lineup that needed it. 8 points in his first 6 games, and he's just one of those guys, Mike, that facilitates offense. And that's what they wanted, and that's what they're getting.
I am on Eastern Conference duty this week, which means I start in Barrie. And how about a 9-game point streak for those Colts, who have 7 wins, an overtime loss, and a shootout loss since October the 25th. Cole Baudouin, 4 goals, 12 assists over those 9 games, and Kayshawn Aitchison picked up 9 goals before his 2-game suspension for altercation with a fan in the Sioux. Now, I like Greg Cowan from the Owen Sound Sun-Times. His take on this, he called it chucking a water bottle at a doofus. I mean, take it however you want to take it, but the official corporate speak is altercation with a fan in the Sioux. Either way, after ending the Pete's 5-game winning streak on Saturday, the Colts now sit in top spot in the Central and second place in the Eastern Conference. Doofus, fan, whatever. The Colts are serving some notice in the East.
Greg Cowan is not wrong. Well, Mike, I'm willing to declare another wagon. Are you ready for it?
I am ready for the wagon.
All right, the wagon is the Flint Firebirds. They have hit another gear, and 8 of their last 10, cruising. They've found the goal-scoring magic formula that I thought might hold them back. Now that they don't have that barrier, they're just flying. And I just wanted to give a shout-out, Paul Flash, Justin Soltz, Rayo Ritzalainen. The coaching staffs in this league often don't get enough credit. They get a lot of flack when things aren't going well, but those 3 gentlemen really have this team humming. And the defensive development I'm seeing on that squad, all of their D have taken a step forward this year, every one of them, and that speaks loudly to those 3 gentlemen.
I think it's a great point, Dan, and I kind of made reference to Flint last week when we were looking at the quarter mark and how wrong I was on the Firebirds, but even said coming into the season, I don't quite know how to put my finger on the pulse of this team. I'm not positive how they're doing it, but maybe defense first is the way. But no matter what you say, these Firebirds are something to watch right now for sure.
Yeah, and like I said on the development point, if you make all your players better, your team outperforms what everyone thought they had on paper.
Okay, in Brampton, we all knew it was going to be a tough year for the Steelheads, but how about a nod to Jakob Fibiger, the 7th rounder to Seattle, one of only 4+ players on the team. And Fibiger's plus 13 is good for a tie for 5th in the league this season. Fibiger's 15 points from the blue line, also 3rd most on the team, just 1 behind forwards Gabriel Sherratt and Kieran Witkowski.
Awesome. Yeah, so moving to Guelph, Mike, and my Guelph and Kitchener points to wrap around this bit are going to tie back into the Memorial Cup race a little bit here. And I just wanted to point out that what bodes well for next year is Guelph, the youngest team in the league at 17.5 years average age. And, they're starting to put it together. And we're in mid-November, and already in November, that team has scored 28 goals, and that's over 6 games. So they're starting to fire, and I know that it kind of coincides with a certain gentleman coming back from Philadelphia, but that team is figuring it out, and as the youngest team in the league, that bodes well for the future. So nice to see Guelph really starting to turn it around. You
remember when it was first reported that Luchenko was going to be coming back to Guelph, and then immediately the talk started, well, where are they going to trade him? And why is it going to be London, for example? But what do you like? I don't know. If I'm George Burnett, I might be holding my cards right now because the Storm, as you say, they're going pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, it's the hardest thing. It's a good problem for teams to have, but it's the hardest thing ever when players who you thought was in your long-term strategic plan to trade and get assets, are your team's just humming. What do you do? How do you tell your kids, sorry, guys, not good enough?
Exactly. Okay, you talked about that wagon in Flint right now. It's my turn to go to Brantford here on the eastern side of the wraparound, and we all know Brantford's a wagon. We've been talking about it all season. So I am going to pick the nit right now, okay? Because we've said every great thing about the Bulldogs so far, and it's understandable as to why. But how about this instead? The secret to beating the Bulldogs is getting to overtime. Brantford has been to OT 6 times this season, and they are one of 3 teams who still do not have an OT win. That includes the extra time loss to Flint last weekend, where the Bulldogs felt as though Flint's Jimmy Lombardi kicked in the winning goal, but it stood as a goal, and it's another overtime loss for Brantford. The other 2 teams without an OT win, Brampton and Sudbury, but they've only played a combined 3 OT games. Combined, that's to Brantford's 6 so far. Still, the Bulldogs are 21 games into this season, and they're yet to lose in regulation. But if you want to beat them, get them to the 61st minute.
That's because Jay McKee knows he's not going to have to play 3-3 in the playoffs. So
yeah, good point. Good point.
So moving to Kitchener, I wanted to tie this into the Memorial Cup, so it's a slightly different bit this week. But I had someone ask me, Mike, this was an interesting question. They said, who on the Kitchener Rangers has clearly taken a step forward this year? And I had to think long and hard. It's hard. They are clearly not firing on all cylinders. Start of the year, I predicted them second. I believe you had them first. We knew they were going to be a good team. What held me back from first was I didn't see that elite scoring level, and we're not seeing it right now. We're seeing, I would say, everyone's kind of underachieving a little bit. So that puts the team in limbo, and why I say that is with the Memorial Cup decision coming at the end of this week, where does Kitchener go? The West is wide open this year, so I think that if Kitchener does not get the Memorial Cup and it's Guelph, then maybe it's a little more of a go for it year. You got Pridham and Chromiak in overage years. Maybe you try and break that deadlock top the West. If Kitchener does host the Memorial Cup, do they consider going the other way and moving out some of those pieces because they need more assets for next year, because they're not trending right now to be a powerhouse next year? They're maybe a couple pieces away or tweaks away. So that decision made by those gentlemen in suits at the end of this week will have a lot to say about where Kitchener goes, I believe.
I will give nods to, because I have a chance to think about it here as you're describing a very interesting situation for sure for Mike McKenzie as the general manager in Kitchener. I like Christian Humphreys' game. I liked it last year. I think it might have come up a notch. Jakub Chromiak has been a stud as far as I'm concerned on the blue line. Those would be 2 guys that jump out to me, but I know a lot of fans are waiting on Luca Romano to show some of that third round potential too.
Yeah, and I just think in my eye, this is my eye, they're a little small on the forward position, get pushed to the perimeter a little too easily, and I think teams know that. And unless you get an inside game, it's hard to score those goals. So I think that's something that's plaguing Kitchener, and we'll see if McKenzie addresses it.
All right, off to Kingston for me, site of next June's live draft we've already talked about. Here on the wraparound, I'm looking at France defenseman Van Williamson. He scored a career-high 3 goals back in 23-24. So I'm thinking he's the kind of player that remembers every goal that he has scored in his OHL career. But his first of this season is going to stand out because of when he scored it. It was with 0.3 seconds left in the second period of Kingston's win last week over Niagara. It tied the game at the time, and the France would go on to win. Williamson had a 5-game assist streak to start the season, and he's got 11 of those assists, but the first goal came with 0.3 seconds left in a period, so he will definitely have a fond memory of that one. And I know you mentioned him last week, Dan. The league recognized him as well as the OHL goalie of the week, but Matthew Minchak, boy, oh boy, the numbers. Goals against below 2, a save percentage pushing .940. That's, as the kids would say, gross.
And the eye test tells me he's legit.
He is legit.
So moving to London, I just want to say, people ask how they keep humming. Well, they tend not to make excuses, that next man up philosophy. So they're down Bidgood, down Nickel, down Brustevich now. Next man up. Logan Howery had a great week, almost a point a game over the last 2 weeks. And on the Sunday game this week, Dale Hunter took the day off with illness. So I'm sure the next man up on the bench as well. How do they do that? Well, a good team system helps, but also an 88% power play helps as well.
I love how the Knights PR account put out the players not playing, including Henry Brustevich, and Dale Hunter is day to day with an illness. There you go. The head coach, just day to day though. It's nothing to worry about.
Just a therapy day.
All right, in Niagara, I can't resist clapping back at Jim, who was chirping us on our YouTube channel this week, because last week we dedicated the Niagara portion of the wraparound to backup Bones, the backup mascot who ran into the net, crashed the net literally as he came onto the ice to get the crowd pumped up. But what do you want us to talk about, Jim? The Ice Dogs, who have lost 5 games in a row and slipped out of first place in the Central Division? Is that what you want us to talk about? Niagara has allowed 25 goals over those 5 games, and their games this weekend coming, Brantford and the team they've lost the division lead to, the Barrie Colts. So 5 in a row, it's going to be tough to break against those two teams this weekend.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Jim, but when your team gives us a highlight that's going to be on the blooper reels for the next 50 years, that's going to be in our wraparounds.
Absolutely. Can't resist stuff like that.
Yeah. All right, so moving to Owen Sound, a team I love. They've been humming. So just an interesting note, though. If I had told you at the start of the year, Mike, that Owen Sound was going to be second in the West at this stage of the season, you would have told me, yeah, of course, Carter George, right? They're kind of doing it with him running 14th in league goalie stats right now. 313 goals against average, 899 save percentage. Respectable numbers, but certainly not Carter George numbers. Guy you expected to hover around 930, right? And a lot of people predicted him to win goalie of the year. I'm not saying he's having a bad year. Part of the reason, 335 penalty minutes those Owen Sound TAC have taken. So some of the shots that guy's facing are high quality.
And you will come out of a game versus Owen Sound a little black and blue, I suppose, based on that.
Absolutely. So you take the good with the bad.
Okay, looking at North Bay next in the East, and Cam Warren did for Team Canada Red at the U17s what he's done for the battalion all season long, and that's rack up the points. Warren with 7 points through 5 games at the U17s while winning gold with Team Canada Red. Warren's 4 goals and 3 assists were good for second most among OHL players at the U17 World Challenge. I know you're curious, so I'll tell you. It was Flint's Charlie Murata who had the most points for an OHLer at the tourney. He had 4 goals and 6 assists for 10 points, so 3 more than Warren. Back to Warren, though. Even after missing games while at the tourney, he is still tied for 3rd in North Bay scoring this season.
And North Bay, just quickly, I owe you an apology because I've had this mental block with Ryder Kelly and calling him Kelly Ryder since his draft year, and apparently I did it in last week's pod, so my apologies, Ryder. I don't know what it is. I just think it sounds cool saying Kelly Ryder, so there you go.
Nothing wrong with that, Dan. Let me tell you a quick story about that. When the Plymouth Whalers were in the league, and the great Pete Krupski, Krupper, still a friend to this day, was the play-by-play and communications guy for the Whalers. And I'm calling a game, and I looked at my lineup sheet, and I swear, I mean, look, I'm getting older. We know that. I was much younger when this happened, so I guess that can't be an excuse. But the Whalers had a player, A.J. Jenks. When I looked at my lineup sheet, I didn't see the little curve on the bottom of the J, so I called him Al Jenks. I corrected this, Dan. I corrected this mid-broadcast. I realized, oh, Farwell, you dummy. It's not Al, it's A.J. Jenks. But Krupper heard, obviously, because he's paying attention to his team on the road. And every time for the next 3 years, I saw Krupper when I went to Plymouth. It's A.J. Jenks, Farwell. I'm like, Krupper, I know. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. A.J. Jenks, I still love you, buddy.
It happens. It's impossible to be perfect with so many teams, so many names. But yeah, my apologies. That's just been my mental block. I don't know what it is. I just love the sound of Cali Ryder. Is that all right?
Ryder Cali it is, though. Ryder Cali.
It is. Just sorry, buddy. All right. So moving to Saginaw. So just a little thing I want to point out, because you know how much I love Dimian Zilkin. I think that guy, I had him as an outside chance of league scoring title, probably more next year than this year, but just a phenomenal talent. Showing a little frustration, though, lately. Just 4 assists in his last 7 games. 3 times taking majors and misconducts, 1 time being tossed. So frustration's building up a little bit with him. He had started the year off with 16 points in 9 games, just 4 assists in the last 7. So frustration's mounting a little bit for him. So I'd like to see him get that turned around.
For Oshawa, as I continue in the East, Lucas Moore. Remember that name? He was one of the players acquired from Brantford in the big Ben Danford, Zachary Sandu trade. And Moore scored his first goal as a Gen against the Peterborough Petes. Nice arch rival, right? But even better, it becomes more memorable for Moore because Peterborough is his hometown team. He played minor hockey in Peterborough, and he liked it so much, scoring that goal against the hometown team, he did it again in the next game versus Brampton. Tough slog right now for Oshawa, though. An 8-game losing streak dropped the Gens into last place in the entire Ontario Hockey League.
Rough treading for them right now.
Yeah, you bet.
Speaking of rough treading, and I'm not going to hit you while you're down, Sarnia, because we talked about you a lot off the top, so I'm going to focus on the positive here. So I saw 2 different Sarnia fans online this week say, I'm not attending any more games this year. What's the point? Well, I'll tell you the point. The point is there are players that are worth the price of admission. And Mike referenced him in the early part of the podcast, but Alessandro Diorio back in your lineup. That kid is dynamite. 5 points in his first 3 games, despite the long layoff. he's a kid that's worth the price of admission. So I remember Mike going back to our days in Kitchener long time ago, and the Kitchener Rangers were miserable when they had a 16-year-old Derek Roy in the lineup, and he was worth the price of admission. So there's always a reason to attend these games, folks. Heads and chins up. It's going to turn around.
That's a great point. And even if it's somebody on the other team that's worth watching, if you're a fan of the game, you're a fan of the game. And I say that as a Leafs fan right now. I'm just watching all the other teams and their highlight reel players. To Ottawa for me on the wraparound. And I'm pretty sure we told you here last week that the Ottawa 67s were for real, and they just continue to prove that point. Give Ottawa 3 straight wins and 17 goals scored, points in 9 straight games, 8 wins and a shootout loss. Jasper Kuda continuing to set the pace over those 9 games with 9 goals and 8 assists for 17 points. I don't know how the 67s, well, maybe that's why or how the 67s are doing it, but did not see this coming. They're for real.
They are. I was wrong on that one. Really admit that.
We both were.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, so sometimes we also get asked, how are certain teams always good? And the Sioux Greyhounds, the last couple times I've watched them in the last couple weeks, look terrific. They're skating, they're aggressive, they're all on the same page. Well, you wonder how? Well, how about 4th round magic, Mike? So Harris Pengratich, Hunter Solomon, Karsten Barbeau, Carson Andrew, all 4th round picks playing on that roster and looking like a couple of them are going to be key pieces going forward. I thought Barbeau was terrific in his debut. So there's 4 4th round picks making an impact in your lineup, all big kids with size that can skate and clearly can play a role. So when you land that often in the 4th round, you're going to be good.
Can't help but think, Dan, that the Sioux was one of the teams at least considering a run for the chance to host the 2027 Memorial Cup. They put out the statement that said they had decided against it, but boy, oh boy, the way that team looks right now and the way it's shaping up, you'd have to think they would have been a pretty good candidate, at least for the team on paper.
Oh, 100%. And without going too far down the rabbit hole of all the things, we don't want to get into politics, but I think you might want to look south of the border at Mr. Trump for that decision as well, because I know economic times in the Sioux are kind of tough, and sounds like they just didn't have quite the commitment from sponsors that they would have hoped to make that bid. But I think they were absolutely worthy and would have been a great host. So it's a shame that non-hockey factors took them out of the running.
It's a great point. And a shout out to our friends at Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie, a long-standing and a great Ontario company for sure. Okay, to Peterborough for me on the wraparound, and overager Matthew Soto played in his 250th OHL game last week. His 18 points this season are good for second most on the Pete's, behind only draft-eligible stud Adam Novotny. Also, don't look now, but after a 5-game winning streak for the Pete's, goalie Easton Rye is now tied for the league lead in wins with 11. Rye started every one of those wins for the Pete's. And a quick note on Tanasi Marintet, who has started Marintet's mission. For every Thursday home game between now and December the 11th, Pete's fans are encouraged to bring a donation of winter clothing to the game to help the less fortunate. Love seeing players get involved in their community like this. Marintet, in an interview, said he recognizes the privilege that he has had to play this game, the platform that he's got. He wants to put it to good use, and here we are with Marintet's mission. Nice job.
Good on you at that age to be leading something like that.
You bet.
All right, well, I'm going to wrap up with Windsor, Mike, and, we talked about the season Carson Woodall was having, just piling up assists, but 0 goals in his first 14 games. And he heard that on the podcast. He said, okay, enough of this. He got 4 goals in his last 10 to complement what is turning into just a top-end offensive year for Carson Woodall. So good on him. But the Spit's kind of just middling right now. 500 in their last 10. Chemistry-ish seems to be a little off, relying a little bit on just the top couple players who are starting to get frustrated with the extra attention they're drawing. So my fearless prediction, Mike, is that the Windsor Spitfires are going to be amongst the next teams to make a move.
I don't know. Is that fearless? It's fairly sturdy. We'll see. Bill Bowler, he likes the deal. He likes the wheel and deal, that guy.
Well, and I think he's had these plans all along. It's just when he was going to pull the trigger. And I think based on what we're seeing right now, it's going to come sooner than later.
All right. Good point. For me, I'm going to finish in Sudbury on the east here. And it was pretty ugly. A 7-game losing streak. But the Wolves did snap it in style. They scored twice in the final 90 seconds to come from behind and beat Saginaw 2-1. Sudbury, however, has allowed a league-high 91 goals against through just 21 games, and they've won just once on the road. The Wolves' next 2 road games are both at Brampton as they try to get win number 2 away from the Wolf Den in Sudbury.
Yeah, Mike, the important thing for me on that one is 1 goal allowed. Sudbury tightening up. That's what they needed to do, and same with the Barrie Colts. Tighten up your end, and good things will follow.
All right. Are we about to see the longest suspension in the Ontario Hockey League in years? And what does happen if the USHL falls under the CHL umbrella? Plus, our prospects of the week still to come on this week's episode of the OHL podcast. The holidays are here, and that means it's the most wonderful time of the year to save with Rakuten. Use Rakuten to stack cash back at your favorite stores on top of holiday sales. That's savings on savings. With Rakuten, you can get cash back on gifts for everyone on your list, from toys for the kids to kitchen gear for the person who loves to cook to electronics for everyone. You can even save on something for yourself. Just shop the stores you love, and cashback is automatically added to your account. And you can choose to get paid via Interac e-transfer, PayPal, or check. Did I mention stores you love? I'm talking Levi's, Expedia, Adidas, Sporting Life. We've even got PetSmart in there. Join for free today and get a new member bonus after minimum qualifying purchases. Just go to Rakuten.ca, download the app, or install the browser extension. That's RAKUTEN. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Dan, just as we wind down another week here on the OHL podcast, we have to come clean and admit that we are recording this week before the league makes what we expect to have made its announcement on the suspension to Luke Dragusica of the Brampton Steelheads. But everybody in hockey and beyond has probably seen this by now. The video started going viral not long after the game on Friday night. Dragusica of Brampton against Brady Blasig of the Oshawa Generals. Dragusica gets kind of bounced around between a couple of players. Nothing offside about the hit. It just was a hockey play. Clearly, Dragusica, frustrated, gets up, and Blasig was closest to him. And Dragusica from behind goes, the best I can describe it is Marty McSorley on Donald Brashear, a full-on baseball swing to the side of Blasig's head/face, whatever you want to call it. Blasig down, bleeding on the ice. Dragusica, at the time of this recording, suspended pending review. You've probably seen as much chatter about this or heard as much chatter about this as I have, Dan, but NHL guys are weighing in. The international hockey community is weighing in. Some are saying Dragusica should never be allowed to play the game of hockey again, which is as drastic as it gets. But what do you make of what we saw, and where do you think the league is going to land on this, understanding that by the time this is out, the league will likely have ruled? Let's see how close we are to what ultimately happens here.
Yeah, well, the first thing is I like to try and take some time, let the emotions fade away so you can do a rational look at here and look at mitigating factors. In terms of mitigating factors, really the only one I can come up with is that he's a teenager. He's an 18-year-old. Okay, that's a mitigating factor. Fair enough. So you don't want to necessarily kick the guy into the gallows for the rest of his life. Everything else, though, goes against this player, does it not? So Dragusica has always played with an edge. I remember watching him in his U16 year before he joined the OHL. Like, that's what got him drafted. He's a tough kid, plays with a bit of an edge, crosses line, takes a lot of penalty minutes. But there's a big line between that and what we witnessed in that game. And yeah, it's a moment in time, frustrations, you name it, but you just simply have to have the self-control to avoid plays like that. And that's not even a play. I won't even call it a play. That's just a violent attack. A two-hander to the head. I mean, he's lucky. He's lucky that Blasig was not seriously hurt. I mean, he was hurt enough. There was blood on the ice, but he's playing again this weekend. So fortunately, there wasn't a concussion or anything too hard. But you just can't do that. You just cannot do that, and it's a weapon. And I heard a lot of chatter about how it broaches the line between hockey play gone wrong and the acceptable risk a player takes when he steps on the ice and criminality. and that's a fine line. And you referenced Marty McSorley, and he was criminally charged because that had nothing to do with hockey. It was not in the heat of a play. It was just it was a violent assault that just happened to be standing in skates. So I look at this very similarly with the mitigating factor of his age, and I look back at, I mean, going way, way back, Mike, and you look at when Alan Lake played in Kitchener and kicked a player with a skate on, was banned for the rest of the season. I look at these similarly. You've got a weapon that can do a lot of damage. You chose to wield it as such, recklessly. So I don't know where this is going to land, Mike, but I'll just say I wouldn't be shocked if it's anywhere between 15 on the low end and the remainder of the season on the high end. I'm guessing, but it's got to be severe.
When I first saw this and you and I started going back and forth about it, it was double-digit games without breaking a sweat. So 10 would have been the absolute minimum. I think I was thinking along the lines of 12 initially. And maybe I'm being swayed by all of the chatter. You make a great point on Alan Lake. We're going back decades to see a play like that and the resulting suspension. I really do think the league has to be abundantly clear on this. And if there are criminal charges, that's for the criminal courts to decide. But I'm not sure you can let a play this reckless stand with even a 30-game suspension. I really think that you're at a point where you have to suspend Luke Dragusica for the remainder of this season. And I want to say something else on this, too, because you referenced a teenager and, to the gallows he goes. I am not in any way condoning this, okay? First and foremost, I'm with Brady Blasig. I'm glad he was able to get back on the ice because even mentally, after something like that happens, I can't imagine what Brady Blasig feels like on the ice now. I'm glad he's okay physically. I hope he's okay mentally. Let's not forget that Luke Dragusica is a young man. I was going to say kid, take it however you want as well. I guarantee you, whether he plays on the edge, whatever, he feels awful for this. And anybody that wants to dunk on him and, say all kinds of rotten things, you're doing that to another human being. He's going to suffer a severe consequence here, and he should. I'm sure he knows that too. Let's remember there's a human being that just made a horrific mistake here. Again, I just want us to think about that. First and foremost, I'm glad Blasig is okay enough to be back on the ice. I think the league really has to set a precedent here and make a case on Dragusica.
I couldn't agree more. That's where I would land too, the rest of the season. And I mean, that is an extremely harsh penalty, which it should be, but it doesn't take the kid's future away. And I know we've all seen these guys over the years, Mike. I've played with a couple who at times they're great kids. They just see red and they lose it. And clearly that's what happened here because it wasn't just the two-hander. He followed it up with a cross-check. So he was in that brains gone mode where he just couldn't control it. And that's a scary thing. So if you're not going to be able to control those impulses, we can't let you be on the ice with these players anymore for a good long time. So I think that's where I land too, Mike. If it were me ruling, he'd be done for the year.
Fun little sidebar to all of this. James Boyd's first day in the league office as the new VP is the day that this ruling is going to have to be considered. How do you feel about making that choice now, Boydie? You wish you stayed in Ottawa or what? Jiminy Christmas. What a way. What a baptism by fire at the league offices for the new VP.
Oh, yeah. Well, baptism by fire, like you said, right?
Exactly.
You asked for it, James.
All right, quickly to our email inbox. Appreciate Bill writing to ohlpodcast@rogers.com. He says he loves the information every week on the podcast, which is great, but I think he must have missed then our episode last week, Dan. I'm not sure, but he was asking about if the USHL were to join the CHL, like the rumor has been out there, what sorts of hurdles would they be experiencing? I think we covered that pretty well, but just because Bill asked, we'll make sure we address it here on the pod instead of just via email. And I mean, it's not like we have a CFL, NFL kind of thing here where one league is 3 downs or one league is 3 periods and one's 2.5 or anything like that. So logistically on the ice, the rules of the game are no different. But what hurdles do you see, Dan, for the USHL or the CHL if it wants to adopt the USHL?
Well, yeah, like you said, we've talked a lot about it, and it probably could be another hour to go over all the nuances of legalities, markets. So I'll keep it kind of high level based on the time we have left on this pod, and talk about the major differences that exist right now between the USHL and the CHL, which would have to be bridged. One being arena size, crowd size, lower in the USHL, media market lower, revenue lower. In terms of on ice, similar and dissimilar in the same way. The USHL tends to lean heavier on the older players, so not as much ice time for 16 and 17-year-olds. That's a semantic thing they'd have to iron out. That's up to the franchise themselves, but that is a difference right now as it exists. Of course, they implement a little bit of a different schedule. It's a different balance than CHL has, where the CHL has your standard NHL style schedule, in division games, conference games, whereas the USHL faces off against the USNTDP program on the under 18 team. So that team is just 16 and 17-year-olds playing against full junior rosters, but theoretically the elite of that group. So that's what balances it out. So there's some quirks and nuances to the differences between the two leagues that would have to kind of be addressed in some fashion. But that's why this isn't a quick fix, I don't think, Bill. This is why it's taking probably a couple years from when we first started talking about it to seeing anything come to fruition, because no one wants to change or be forced to change and adapt, but there are going to be some things that have to be evened off or leveled off before that becomes a partnership.
And one of the other big hurdles in this that we touched on at some length last week, Dan, is as attractive as it seems from the CHL perspective, if you will, to bring in this fourth league, then all of a sudden you've got four leagues competing for championships and ultimately the Memorial Cup, et cetera. Don't overlook the NHL interest in all of this and its sincere interest, the NHL's sincere interest in protecting minor hockey in the United States, or amateur hockey in the United States. And I think that is going to be one of the biggest stumbling blocks to actually making this happen.
Yeah, that's very valid. And I always look at it and think, well, with how involved USA Hockey is at all levels, including the NHL, and a lot of the executives in the NHL board of directors, that there's a very high probability that there's some financial prop ups to help the USHL level the playing field with the CHL. But then when you do that, you have other nuances, right? Like, well, what about the US teams in the CHL? Do they get that handout too, like the other American markets? So there's a lot of things that will have to be ironed out. But I think to some extent that will come into play, is how does the NHL get involved here to kind of make things sync up? And that's why these talks are happening right now. I'm sure all of these topics have been laid out on the table to figure out what they could do to make that sync.
Sometimes when Dan and I are texting before sitting down to record the podcast, we're bouncing ideas back and forth. And this past week was one of those times we thought, I don't know if we got a whole lot of meat on the bone, and here we are now coming up on 70 minutes of OHL podcast coverage for you this week. We would be remiss if we didn't have our prospects of the week. We like to leave you with the NHL draft eligible player that caught the most of our attention this past week. So, Dan, I'll turn it to you to start with your prospect of the week this week.
Yeah, I'll be quick because I didn't go really far down the rabbit hole in this one, Mike. I had to go with Chase Reed, and we saw him live this week, and is a phenomenal player. I loved what I saw from him last year. Leading those Greyhounds from the point, a right shot defender who can skate, really can defend. I was looking at his defending and thought maybe that'll be a knock because he's a really offensive guy, but no, he skates his way out of trouble. His positioning's great. He's playing in unison with his teammates, and a deadly wrist shot from the point. So Chase Reed's my guy, Mike.
Out of curiosity, you mentioned having seen him, obviously, this past weekend. Did he leave the ice in that game against Kitchener, or...
You know what? He might have gone for a drink of water during the media timeout. But why would you? Why would you? I mean, that kid looked the fitness. You can see the fitness level in some of these kids just from, like, he didn't even look like he was sucking wind after these shifts. I mean, he's just, you can see why he's highly appealing to NHL teams.
So it's funny, when it comes to this part of our podcast, I kind of like to go for that sexier pick, if you will, the lower on the radar or less visible. And I'm, try to impress you with our knowledge here and the vast array of players we're watching. And I too thought, listen, you can't overlook a guy just because he's a highly rated prospect, right? And I'm on exactly the same page as you, Dan. Chase Reed is the guy, 7 goals in 7 games, an 8-game point streak, second most points among D, second in goals among D, blah, 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 blah. And by the way, those gains have been happening this month. 7 of his 9 goals, 11 of his 26 points since October the 30th. Chase Reed is going to go in the first round next June unless something ridiculous happens, and he deserves to be recognized as our prospect of the week this week.
He does, and I'll give a quick honorable mention to those Sioux unis as well, if I could.
Speak for yourself, pal. Try those numbers on the sleeves were so hard to pick up, but yes, the black with the red greyhound on the front did look pretty slick. A little hard for us guys up in the broadcast booth, but we'll take it. I'm sure they're selling lots in the merch stores, which is exactly what it's all about, right?
It is, and I'll tell you, if you need a tip, if it's hard reading the names, 25 is Reed. That's Chase Reed.
Did I mention he didn't leave the ice? He was the easy one to pick up, and thank God AJ Jenks wasn't on the team anyway.
Good old Al.
Good old. He'll always be AJ. You'll always be Al to me.
Yeah.
That man over there is Dan Mahar. Find him on X at his name, Dan Mahar. My name is Mike Farwell on X at Farwell_OHL. Do like Bill did. Send us an email anytime. We'll respond. We'll deal with it on the pod if you've got questions. OHL podcast at Rogers.com. And we are in your ears and on YouTube with new episodes every Tuesday. Thanks for being a part of our OHL podcast community.